welcome in here on the Unemployed podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer. It is another Building Blocks Thursday, and that means our guy Tim Verghese from Inside Nebraska joins to talk all things recruiting. But first, Building Blocks Thursdays are brought to you by Bubbles and Blocks Child Development Center. With 3 convenient locations across the capital city, Bubbles and Blocks is well suited to handle your child care needs. One of the great things about Bubbles and Blocks is that many of the teachers have a wealth of experience. They've dealt with all kinds of situations and can help tailor the experience your child might need to get the most out of their time each day. Be it hands-on learning, arts and crafts, or simply adjusting to behavioral norms, an experienced teacher can reinforce and help prepare your child for the world around them. Plus, much like recruits value stability, so do parents. So does Bubbles and Blocks, where its management team has been in place since 2019, with some of them having even started with the daycare when it opened in 2013. Spots are open at all 3 centers. Get your child enrolled today. Give them a call, 402-328-0404. Once again, 402-328-0404, or shoot an email to info@bubblesandblocks.com. Should also mention here that Bubbles and Blocks won Lincoln's Choice for Best Preschool and was a finalist for Best Daycare as well. So if you needed more than just me telling you that this is a great place to send your child, the city of Lincoln agrees in general. So congratulations to Bubbles and Blocks. Well-deserved honors, I am sure. All right, Tim. Let's dive into it. Nebraska got a commitment. They got a commitment from someone that you had been projecting for a little while. They got a commitment at what I don't know if I call it a position of need, but I think it's a very important position, particularly with, what Nebraska has already on its roster and sort of looking down the line. What can you tell us about the big news that came out of Sunday?
Yeah, Nebraska finally, or I wouldn't say finally, but added the commitment of Corey Hadley Jr., 4-star safety, number 7 safety in the country per the consensus rankings. A prospect the staff has been after, specifically Addison Williams has been after now for some time. Williams has known this kid since middle school. Hadley camped back at UCF in 8th grade back when Williams was there. Williams was the first to offer. Just about a year later, coming out of his freshman season, also at UCF. And then they've kind of picked up where they left off once Addison Williams joined Nebraska's staff. He visited 3-4 times last year, visited again this spring. And with each passing visit, it just, he said it just felt more and more like home. One was the connection with Addison Williams. He talked about this very early on in this recruitment. Dating back to last summer, he's not a kid who is about the attention, is about the recruiting process, about the drama or any of that. He was very methodical in his process, very businesslike in his approach. I think his offer list reflects that in terms of how he handled his recruitment for a true blue chip prospect who was coveted across the country. He prioritized the programs that prioritized him. And that's how we ended up with this top group of Nebraska, Georgia Tech, Mississippi State, Auburn, and a few others when, there were some bigger programs, or what you would consider bigger programs involved. But he was someone who relationships were important, playing time was important, development was important. And these 3-4 programs are the ones that stood out. But consistently since Addison Williams joined Nebraska staff and he made that first visit to Nebraska, it's been Nebraska, the program at the very top of this thing, that has impressed him the most from a relationship side of things, that has shown him the potential to be developed. And I think his relationship with Addison Williams is really unique. And so this is a prospect who is a true safety, in my opinion, can play either safety spot, has the versatility to play nickel if Nebraska needed him to. He's versatile enough to do whatever he's asked to do. Like he kind of said last summer when I caught up with him, he said, it doesn't matter to me. I play safety, I play nickel. I just make plays. It doesn't really matter to him where he is on the field. He's a playmaker. 6'1", 180-ish pound safety, rangy frame, has like that true kind of sideline to sideline ability, can be your center fielder, when as like that one high safety in certain looks, perfectly capable of dropping down into coverage if needed, can come down and hit, not his best thing, but is capable of hitting, and willing to do so. Just needs to, I think, wrap up a little more. I think that's one note from him. on his tape is just wrap up a little more consistently. But you like the physicality on tape, you like the versatility, and you love the frame, and most importantly, I think the ball skills. He's someone who has had production as a turning the ball over, and I think he shows good ball skills at the point of attack.
So this is a guy that it felt like this was a big commitment because it's one of those targets that you've been after for a while. It's someone that they've had on campus already, what, 3 times and once already this year. He
So
was
four
back in
times,
March,
yeah, four
4 times
times now,
yesterday.
yeah.
And was he back in March or am I making that up?
Yes, he was.
Yeah, so, a guy that they went after, I guess the question whenever you end up with somebody like this out of Georgia, what's your concern level about how this recruitment, like, is it over? Do you think there's, barring any kind of coaching change? So let's take that out of the equation. Everything stays the same. Do you think this is one that Nebraska can feel pretty good about all the way till signing day?
I think so. I mean, again, this is a recruitment where he wasn't really about the drama, and even coming out of his commitment, talked about he'd already set up these official visits with these other programs, and noted I'm 100% committed. But if these programs want to honor these official visits and let me take them, then I'll take them. But I think that's an ongoing conversation between him and Nebraska and those other programs. I would anticipate most of those other visits don't get taken, and even if they do, he's pretty shut down, and he's let other programs know he's shut down in his recruiting process. Now, what could change here is, yeah, Nebraska still, I think, needs to win on the field in the fall and keep these things together. Though I will say he noted and specifically noted to our Chad Simmons that the comfort that he's developed in Nebraska through each passing visit is to the point that no matter what happens, even if Addison Williams isn't for some reason at Nebraska in the future, he can still see himself finishing out his career here and developing into an NFL player. So I think the key step for him moving forward and for Nebraska to make sure this remains locked in is that developing relationship with Tyler Yelk, the new safeties coach, making sure that remains strong and making sure that again his relationship with Addison Williams remains strong as well. And I mean I don't think you can never say never here, but he's not one that I think is about the games, and now that he's committed, I think he's good. He's happy to be done with this whole recruiting process.
Yeah, that's something that you kind of intimated a few different times that maybe a commitment could be coming simply because he knows where he wants to go and he's not someone who's really all that enthusiastic about the whole recruiting process. And so that seems to be the case. One of the other sort of thoughts that I have just from the outside looking in, um, how big of a commitment is this? Because there's still maybe a little flirtation from Torrey Pittman with some other schools. You, at least, now you're kind of doubled down on the amount of safeties and high end defensive backs that you've added here already. Do you kind of view it in any of that way, or am I kind of off the wall on that one?
I mean, I get it. I mean, somewhat just with Tory still continuing to. I mean, there is some other schools still in the mix, and I would say this as well. Like I mean, we still need to kind of see it from Tory on the field.
I
He's ranked pretty
100%
high.
agree. We've
Yeah,
talked about
he's
this
ranked pretty
before.
high. Yeah, for sure, and he's ranked pretty high off the athleticism, off some of the flashes he's had on tape. But still, think we need to see this come together more consistently for him. So a lot of eyes will be on his senior season, and I think regardless, I think Nebraska has been actively pursuing a big and not big, but relative compared to last year, especially like a 3-4 man DB group. This I think more than the Pittman news gives them some clarity on how they approach the board moving forward.
Yeah, so let's
They're
dive into
trending.
that.
Yeah, so they're trending well for Jalen Hill, four-star cornerback, who, I caught up with him earlier this month, and he was initially planning to announce his commitment in August. Just about a week later, finalized his official visit schedule and is now planning to announce his commitment on June 9th, just days after his Nebraska OV. That one's shaping up well for Nebraska. Adam Gorney joined me and a few others that said with the new prediction for Nebraska to land Hill today. I think Nebraska is well positioned there. Bryce Williams, four-star cornerback on the other side of the country, down in South Florida, a 6'2" cornerback with some versatility to potentially play safety. Former Florida State commit, has 40 plus offers. Clemson recently offered. That's a program I'd keep an eye on. I think they're going to get an official visit, and they're a program that I think could get push Nebraska off their spot as the front runner in this recruitment. That's a program that's made a late surge. They're making a late push. They just got him back on campus, or just got him to campus earlier this week. That's a program I'd keep an eye on. And they're still after Tavares Harrington, still after Bam Whitfield, still have a few other safeties that they're still keeping track of. Elijah Juan Houston down in Texas, who's still set to officially visit. So Now they have some options, have 2 spots left, and they can figure out what to do with it. Do they want to add 2 corners? Do they want to add a corner and maybe a nickel safety like versatile type? I think the big wild card on this board is, I would say, Tavares Harrington, the guy they'd love to have. I think he's probably their dream addition in terms of, if they could just pick one of these guys
Mhm.
to add to the room, it would probably be Harrington at 6'3", 180 pounds, and he's as versatile as it gets. Can play both safety spots, can actually play corner if he needs to. But he's one I would keep a very close eye on because Nebraska needs to address that nickel position this cycle, and he's one that I think could really fit that. Now, that said, like I mentioned, Corey Hadley has the versatility to play that nickel role. Torrey Pittman actually has is one of the more versatile DBs on Nebraska's board, already obviously committed, but he's one who could play both safety spots and the nickel role just off what we've seen from him athletically. Again, need to see him be more of like a killer and more of a true kind of
Mhm.
blue chip prospect consistently snap to snap. But the flashes are there, the athleticism is there, and he's a guy who with development at the next level can still become a very high level defensive back. Just need to see it a little more consistently with him. But yeah, that's kind of where the DB board's at right now.
Which is it sounds really good. I mean, it feels like, of all the positions so far, Nebraska's kind of set itself up the best, really, with kind of that defensive back group. And I know there's some others where it could finish really strong too, but you have to feel pretty good about the work that's already been put in by Addison Williams and then and the rest of the staff. Then here's the big thing, and you know this, Tim, like you put that class together, you get Jalen Hill, you add what you want, say, to finish out that group. It allows them to kind of move forward to 2028, where I imagine things are kind of taking shape there, that once you sort of have 2027 done, you can kind of move ahead to building those relations with 28s and getting those guys out for visits and everything else.
Yeah, like that. I mean, especially compared to last year, you look at the DB board where it was at this time last year, where it's at coming into the summer. I think Addison Williams is going to be, and Tyler Young, the safeties coach, both those guys going to be just about done with 27 efforts coming out of July. I would assume, just about. There may be a guy or two out there they're still working on. There may be someone they'd like to keep tabs on in case there's a chance for a late flip or something. I'm sure they're going to keep their irons in the fire and stay active, but yeah, coming out of July, I think attention is going to pretty much fully turn over to 28, and they've already done a very good job early on in 28. They're very much in the mix for Casey Barner, the number 2 safety in the country out of Powder Springs, McKeitron, who's drawing some Caleb Downs comps. People around that
Wow.
state in Georgia talking about him like he's the next Caleb Downs. He's the next superstar level safety. Obviously, it's going to be tough to pull him away from hometown or in-state Georgia, but Nebraska's in the mix. Have gotten him to town at least once already. Giovanni Tuggle, the number 3 safety in the country, also out of Georgia, another one Nebraska well positioned for early on. So yeah, they've already gotten a leg up here in 28, and now it's just about kind of getting pedal to the metal once they kind of close the book or just about close the book on this 27 class.
Yeah. Okay. So now this gives Nebraska 8 commitments. Let's see kind of where they're sitting rankings wise. They are 13th in the industry rankings. Is that right
That sounds about
for
right.
rivals? Yeah. And so I guess as we look through these other guys, I'm just going to go player by player, and I've got a couple questions on each. And if you have anything else if you want to throw in, but we'll go right to Torrey Pittman. I mean, we kind of mentioned it. For me, a lot of it is when I've seen Torrey play, a handful of times. There's always that moment where it's like, yeah, that's why that guy is rated what he is. But then you can go long stretches of time where you feel like he should have a greater impact on the game at hand. You mentioned consistency. That's been a comment from others. Where in specific, not so much just the consistency, any specific parts of his game that you'd like to see go up, this spring and into next fall?
Yeah, well, just the playmaking side of things, the instincts, some of that stuff. I mean, really, if you want to break it down to like the just a pure prospect evaluation level, with him, I think he flashes good instincts. I think he shows at times really good understanding of spacing, timing, reading quarterbacks' eyes. adjusting to the receiver and making a play on the ball. But I think his instincts in terms of coming downhill as a run defender could continue to improve. His ability to just be in position. He's the best athlete on the field more often than not. But I want to see him put himself in position to make more plays, both offensively and defensively. It's something that we just have not seen, I think, enough of with him. It's like you mentioned. I say this all the time. Look, he's a kid who's ranked right now in the top 50, top 5 safety in the country. True blue chip kind of prospect here. I've seen a good bit of these top 50 guys now across my time. And I've been all over now. I've seen these guys in Florida. I've seen these guys in Texas, both at big schools, at like 6A programs, and at smaller schools. I know what it's supposed to look like. And the thing with Pittman, I think my question is, you're a true blue chip prospect, you should be dominating these games at the high
Yep.
school level to an extent that he just has not just yet. So when I say playmaking, when I say instincts, you show an improvement in that stuff, then you start to become more of a dominant player. So that's the next step for him as a senior is taking over games, playing like a true blue chip prospect. He's the highest ranked player in the state. He's the number one prospect in the state. I would like to see him as a senior kind of show that ability on the field.
So the next thing I'm going to ask, and this is no slight at where he was playing previously at Omaha Central, but how much do you think it maybe helps that Torrey Pittman has a change of scenery here and maybe some different coaching, asked to do different things, different voices inside his ear as he's going about his senior season?
Yeah, so I will say this. I did pick up. I don't know if it's a guarantee he's going to be at Miller North as a senior. Still kind of figuring out where exactly he's
Oh,
going to be. If it is a change of scenery, if that's what's coming, don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for him. An opportunity to kind of be in a different system, work around guys where there were at times at Central where it felt like it was all on him defensively or even offensively, where he was kind of the sole weapon they targeted. Of course, they had Kylan Haney, Yasir Grigsby, and a few other offensive weapons, but there were times where just felt like they were putting a lot on his plate, and more so than the offensive side of things. Defensively, I want to get a clear picture of what this looks like when the pieces around him not know what they're doing, but are kind of filling their gaps at the front level. They're filling their gaps at a high level. The linebackers are closing, and he kind of just has to be the cleanup guy or whatever that looks like. But when things are more sound around him, I just want to see what that looks like. And honestly, I don't know if we're going to get that until he gets up to Nebraska. But again, that's something that it kind of clouds the evaluation a little bit when you see a guy who from that safety spot does have to kind of do a lot of everything, and is asked to kind of be the guy where they if he doesn't make the play, it's going to be a touch. Is kind of what it is that and that felt weird, and so I want to see what this looks like. Unfortunately, again, it's something where we may not see it until he gets to Nebraska.
yeah, absolutely. Moving on, Trey Taylor on Rivals, the 63 player in the country, the number 6 quarterback, the number 5 player in the state of Illinois. Well, no, that's the composite. So that's the composite. Sorry. I'm uh I'm new at this. Never done recruiting stuff before. 71st nationally, 5th at quarterback, 5th in the state for the Rivals rankings. Trey Taylor, I have several questions. We'll start with this one, and then save the more kind of pie in the sky one after. Who are some of the guys that he's most involved with in your mind peer recruiting at this point? We know Ahmad Hudson. We know that's a big one. Who else sort of stands out as somebody that you think he's been in the ear of? There's some value here in what he's able to bring as a peer recruiter. Any other names that really sort of stand out for you at this point?
Yeah, Mud Hudson, of course, is the top of the list. Nebraska's still working hard on that one, trying to close there as they battle LSU. Along the offensive line, they missed out on Kennedy Brown, who committed to Texas A&M. Nebraska's still going to try there, still try and earn a potential OV and try and get him back on campus. I don't think they're going to go quietly from that recruitment. That's another one to at least watch, just because they're going to maintain communication there. Jeep Wade, Trey Taylor, Nebraska's coaching staff, so on and so forth. Timmy Aliu, four-star offensive lineman out of Locust Grove, Georgia. I'll have a little note on him later today. Still think Nebraska's at the top of that recruitment, but Florida's closed the gap as of late. They're making some real waves along the offensive line side of things as of late, and so that's going to be a recruitment to keep an eye on because Nebraska's well positioned there. They're going to get the last OV, and it wouldn't surprise me if he comes out of that OV committed, but just something to watch. So you have to still fend off Florida, fend off Georgia, fend off a few programs still working to land Aliu. And then at wide receiver, there's a few they're working on. Isaiah Alvarez for one, Matthew Gregory for another, Khalil Taylor, who plays on the 7-on-7 circuit with Trey Taylor. Look, in all three of those recruitments right now, it's Nebraska's in that top group, in that top 2 to 3. And most people I talk to, with Gregory, it's Notre Dame, Nebraska, Penn State. People put Nebraska right there, number 2, if not 1, depending on who you ask. With Khalil Taylor, feels like it's Penn State or Nebraska for him. And I would feel similarly about Isaiah Alvarez. I think Nebraska is the program at the very top of that recruitment. He's from the Northeast, from New Jersey. The sense around that recruitment is he wants to go a little further from home, doesn't really want to stay close to home and play for Rutgers. Is on the radar and has an offer from Penn State. Don't really think he'll end up there either. Michigan State looks to be Nebraska's biggest biggest competition there. Wouldn't count on Colorado. They're kind of a dark horse in that recruitment. But that's kind of where the wide receiver board set up, very similarly to the DB board, where there's these guys where I think if Nebraska had their pick and we're just able to say, hey, this is who we want to round out this class or to be our third receiver commit, that's who they take. But they've set up a good amount of backup options behind them and set themselves up with a few options where even if they miss on that this is the guy we really want, they have other options there where they can pivot to, and it's not like it's a massive drop off. It's not like this is a true backup option. It's just, we've set ourselves in position for a couple good wide receivers. Let's figure out who actually wants to be here.
Yeah, I have kind of a side question now because of one of the names you mentioned there at wide receiver. Back when I was kind of covering this, one of the pieces of information I picked up from Matthew Gregory after I think it was a game visit that he had at Nebraska is that he wasn't particularly enamored with their passing offense, and he was not high on Dylan Raiola. How much of it shifted in terms of his interest in Nebraska because Dylan Raiola, like it looks different, and now they weren't really likely to ever cross over. I don't know if you heard this or not, but what was given to me is that he viewed Dylan Raiola and Drew Aller as roughly the same type of quarterback, and that was not meant as a compliment. And so what I was told is that he was pretty unenamored with both Penn State and Nebraska from a passing standpoint because those quarterbacks. I know Nebraska had been recruiting them the whole time. It felt like their chances of getting Matthew Gregory, at least, back when I was hearing this last fall, would have been pretty low. Is it just they kept putting in work and now the quarterback picture just looks a little bit different? Or what do you kind of size that up to when you hear those sort of comments?
Yeah, so some of this is, I mean, Daniil George has stayed consistently. I was just about a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, I'd say, just about ready to kind of call it on Nebraska and Gregory.
Right.
And
Because
but
it was quiet for a long time, even as
right,
someone who hasn't done this day to day. Like, I know these names, I know kind of what's going on, and all of a sudden there was like this probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago. It's like, oh, Matthew Gregory in Nebraska, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. I guess
yeah. So
you get Dylan Raiola out of there, and suddenly it's a different picture. That
yeah, so
it
some of this
fascinates
is
me.
right, and so some of this is Daniil Schwartz's communication. I think he stayed pretty consistent in making sure Nebraska remains in the mix, despite not getting him back to campus since he first visited back in September. Now they're scheduled to get an official visit from him. I think that consistency paired with the change at quarterback, the change in the offensive system, and it's not just I'll tell you this, it's not just a Gregory thing. I've heard this from multiple targets, multiple commits, multiple like receiver targets, and it's not even receivers anymore. Like it's others of just like, look, the change was needed. They needed to move in a different direction at quarterback. We like the change they're making. And I think there's a lot of belief, I think, longer term in a lot of these guys in the 27 cycle, who whether they've been out to these 7-on-7 circuits or these camps and seen Trey Taylor in person, or they've tuned in online or whatever, or they've just seen the stories and seeing the highlights and seeing whatever, there is a draw to the player that Trey Taylor has become. I mean, look, like we're at a point now where he is firmly one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the country. And that wasn't necessarily the narrative when he committed to Nebraska this time of year ago. I just had this conversation with somebody. When Nebraska committed, or when he committed to Nebraska, there were a couple major Power 4 programs that felt it was a reach for Nebraska to do what they did. He felt like he was a little overrated and all of that. And then you watch the junior season that he had, threw for over 3,500 yards, completed over 80% of his pass attempts, ran for another 600 yards. Has continued to just have strong offseason showings, and his frame. The big question with him was the frame. that is filled out in a way that I don't think people really expected. And so now we're at a point where you see these QB dominoes falling across the country, and there's some of these programs nationally that are either considering circling back on Trey Taylor or lamenting the fact that they did not get a shot to truly court Trey Taylor during this recruitment. Now he's firmly committed to Nebraska. He's shut things down 100%. I don't imagine schools will stop when you have that type of talent at that position. Schools are not going to stop pursuing him until he signs in December, which is why it's important Nebraska handles business on the field in the fall. Because again, if I would say if there's any sense that Matt Rule is truly in danger, if there's a sense that if it gets to a point where Nebraska has to make a coaching change or something like that, then you start to really wonder about that commitment and other programs, because he's stated it himself. As long as Matt Rule, Dana Holgorsen, this staff is here, he's committed to Nebraska. He's firmly committed to the staff, believes a lot in the staff. And again, that talent has players like Matthew Gregory and Khalil Taylor giving Nebraska a very, very serious, very, very serious consideration. I would also say it might be what gives Nebraska the edge in that Ahmad Hudson recruitment down the stretch. If you're looking for something that Nebraska can use to separate themselves, there's not a quarterback in the country that Ahmad Hudson is closer with than Trey Taylor. And those two have not just developed that relationship off the field. We saw it at the Battle of the Boneyard last year. There were just various camps and getting together in different sessions and in different settings. They've become quite comfortable with each other on the field as well. Taylor would love to play with Hudson. Same goes to the other side of things. Hudson would love to catch passes from Taylor. Will that make a difference? Will that be what separates Nebraska? We'll have to wait and see. Of course, LSU has a lot to offer on their end as well. But if you're looking for something that can give Nebraska an edge here, it's potentially that.
Yeah, no doubt. And then just to kind of put a bow on all of that, it would really behoove Nebraska for a variety of reasons for their offense to be a little bit more exciting in the passing game than it was this past year. Because as Tim sort of mentioned, as I mentioned with Matthew Gregory, receivers did not exactly come out of the games of which they attended super fired up about the passing offense. I think they like the ideas and some of the stuff going on there, but Nebraska just lack big play explosiveness, and you could
Yeah,
tell.
and I mean, you've heard through the spring that it's been an emphasis. It's what Calandria
Mhm.
does well, is creating those explosives. And so I do think you're going to see whether it's just conceptually, whether it's we actually see the production. I do think you're going to see a more receiver happy offense in the fall. It's gonna be a matter of time before we just have to see it on the field to see whether that's
Right.
actual production or it's just like, oh, there's a lot of cool concepts they're running. Those receivers are getting open, but they can't get in the ball.
Yeah. Well, that's always the fun with this. We get to wait until September to know whether any of it matters. All right. Last thing with Trey Taylor, and you kind of touched on all of it, and we can go kind of quick on this. What do you think has to happen for him to get a 5th star, to be a 5-star quarterback?
Yeah, I
Is
think
there
it's going to
really
happen.
anything he can do at this point?
I had this conversation with him, with people close to him, and then people on the evaluation side of things on what he needs to do, what is physically possible for him at this point. And I had an honest conversation with Taylor when I saw him a couple weeks ago at OT7 too, of how do you surpass the junior season in which he threw for, like I said, 3,500 yards, completed over 80% of your passes, ran for 600 yards? How do you overcome that? How do you improve upon that? He's trying. His goal is to whatever that looks like, to try and improve that. Look, that completion percentage might come down a little bit. It's going to be hard to complete over 80% of your passes for 2 consecutive seasons. But he's going to try. He's going to try and be as efficient as possible, try to overcome those stats. I think the important thing for him now is trying to win that state championship. I think that's one question evaluators still have about him. Now, my question on that end would be, how impressive really is it if he wins at a program like Millard South when we just saw them roll to a state championship?
I mean, they've
And
won the last 2.
Right, exactly. We've seen them do this multiple times. He's stepping into a school that has been highly productive, a highly productive passing offense. So look, like there's a chance those stats look better, but are we really learning anything if he wins the state championship? And like I think for me, for example, like I was convinced that Trey Taylor has what it takes to win in those big moments and win at the crunch time. When I saw him go back and forth with Israel Abrams at Montaigne Catholic last fall, as a game I think ended like 67-53. It was literally just a whoever has the ball last is going to win that game. and they went back and forth. It was a back and forth touchdown, like touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. And Taylor kind of showed in that moment, despite falling short. Again, it was Abrams got the ball last. But he showed he's got what it takes to play in those crunch moments, to put the team on his back and make big plays in those situations. That's what I was looking for. I don't think you necessarily need to see him stack wins on the field. He went 8-3 last year. That's good enough. We saw him win big games last year. So he's answered those questions. For me, I think the big things are going to be this offseason. Next is Elite 11 finals. If he places in the top of that, which I think he's got a very good shot at that, he places in the top five, I think he's got a shot at winning the whole thing. But if he at least places in the top five, I think he's going to set himself up very well for that fifth star, or at least earn himself up to a point where, from the consensus rankings, he averages out to that fifth star, one of the top 3 to 4 quarterbacks in the country. And then the next thing would be the season in the fall, proving on the field that you can win a little more, continuing to build up on that production from last season. And then he's going to compete in the All-American Bowl in January. That's going to be his final opportunity to really show evaluators something before he enrolls at Nebraska. And then there'll be a final rankings update after that game, or after, kind of the All-Star game kind of things settle down. That is going to be his final opportunity. I think if it hasn't come together at that point, if he hasn't earned it at that point with his play on the field, with the Elite 11, with all of that, maybe it just takes a really dominant showing and a really strong showing at All-American do it. But yeah, we're getting to the point now where I'm asking, and I'm pressing some of our evaluators, both here and other places, on what's it going to take for him to get his fifth star, because I don't really know what else he can do to earn that.
No doubt about it. All right, let's move down the list and let's take a look at running back Amir Brown, who comes out of North Carolina. He, on Rivals, is the 64th running back, I believe, 32nd player in the state of North Carolina. North Carolina, a talent-rich state that actually in these 27, 28 have some really, really interesting guys that Nebraska is certainly trying for. Whether they have the chance to get remains to be seen beyond Amir. But the question that I kind of have with Amir is, just from a comparison standpoint, so people can kind of think about it in their mind, like, who does this guy remind you of as a running back? You can go pro, college, archetype, whatever you want to do with it. But what does his style kind of look like?
I'll make it easy. The staff comparison for him when he was coming up, or when they were recruiting him, and the guy he spent the most time with when he was back in town for the spring game, it was Emmett Johnson. Emmett Johnson's kind of been the comp for him. I do think play style wise they're a little different. Emmett is shifty, and a guy who, if he's in the phone booth, if he's matched up head on, he's going to look to juke you and get out of the way. Amir is a little more lower to the ground and more willing to run through somebody, and a little more physical in that sense. I think that gives him something. But like Emmett, I think once he gets a head full of steam, he's really rolling in the open field. He's someone that's hard to bring down, hard to get hands on. I think in a similar way. They have similar running styles. I will say, like Emmett, I think developed that shiftiness we saw through college and we saw in this last year. That just developed with vision and understanding the play in front of him. That's something that we're going to have to see develop with Amir. But yeah, he's a well-rounded back who runs low to the ground, runs with a low pad level, does a good job between the tackles, is not afraid to kind of bounce outside as well if needed. Has the top end speed, I think, to kind of separate. I think he's faster top end wise, or at least shows a little more explosive ability at the top end than Emmett did. And that goes that I pair that with the violence he has at the point of attack, kind of running through people. Just a little more of an explosive player than Emmett was. He also shows some value as a pass catcher, like Emmett can do some of that stuff. Now the thing with Amir is going to be just the workload he's taken to this point, and what this looks like at the next level. When he's splitting carries, I think that's something that's actually going to be good for him, is working into a running back rotation, or working into alongside, behind, whatever that looks like, alongside Jamal Rule and the rest of the backs here at Nebraska. I think it'll be better for him, but have to see what that looks like on his end because he's kind of been the bell cow over there at Roseville for a couple seasons now, and I just want to know kind of where his head's at, and he's open to it, absolutely open to it, and excited about teaming up with Jamal Rule and some of the other backs in Nebraska, but the idea of it isn't always the same as actually living in a rotation when you're making that jump to the next level. So that's a question for I think with him. But like Jamal Rule, and I would say more so than Jamal Rule because that was a question with Jamal coming out of high school was his ability to put on the weight needed to translate to the next level. I think
He's
Amir's
already a
already
little bigger. Yeah.
Amir's thicker. Yeah, Amir looks like
Yeah.
looks like a linebacker. He's like on the north side of
Yeah.
200 pounds already. Has some thickness to his frame, and he's a guy who there's not going to be a whole lot of questions on his ability to fit in at the college level at the next once he enrolls. It won't take all that time. I mean, he's going to have to do some work to his body to withstand the contact he's going to take in the Big Ten. But that's really it. He's a guy who I feel is weirdly underranked in this class. I think he's kind of slipped down the rankings over time, and I don't really know why. He's been productive. He's a well-rounded back. He's what you're looking for. A very sound running back prospect, in my opinion. But he's not sexy. I think that's the word. Like he's not like a sexy back, and I think that's something that maybe hurts him a little bit when we're talking rankings. But he's a guy who's going to be productive, and I think going to be able to produce and potentially work into that rotation at a very young age.
Is there any like comparison in terms of because Jamal Rule is sort of similar, where he's a highly productive high school running back that Power Four teams were interested in. I felt like no evaluators were particularly that interested in Jamal Rule the way the college teams seem to be. Is there just something about North Carolina running backs? Is it something about these two guys specifically? Because when you say sort of unsexy, like I get what you mean, but guys that go and produce and do the sort of things that these guys have done, it still has to matter to some level. Like it can't always just be, well, if he gets the opportunity, he could definitely do that. Sometimes you actually have to prove that someone can do it.
Right. And so some of it is just like what the talent at the position and how that talent has evolved. And some of it is like, okay, with both of these guys, yeah, they're both going to be like you can project these guys as effective college quarterbacks, but what separates, I think, the elite backs, at least when we're evaluating them at the high school level, from the not so elite backs, are the guys that don't get tackled very much. The guys that are consistently taking stuff like house calls, are consistently, taking runs in from 70, 80 type yards out, long runs, explosive runs, showing that. And at the very top of this group, you have a few backs that have done that consistently. Now, when you get a little lower, obviously it's where, and so that's why I think with Jamal's flashed that at times in high school, where when he had the opportunity to break some tackles and get into the open field and let loose and run, he did it. But with both of these guys, what makes them well, not unique, but what makes them, I think, not sexy is the dirty work they do between the tackles. It's okay, they're running hard, they're gaining 5-6 yards, but they're consistently churning their feet consistently. For Jamal, it was a lot of kind of shiftiness and working through and getting up there to maximizing each run, maximizing the yardage he got in each run. It's in each run. With Brown, it's more so he runs with that violence, with that pad level where it's hard to square up with him and tackle him. He's going to run over at least one person. It just feels like on tape, going to run over at least one person before he gets down. And so both of those things, they're not really sexy on tape, but you can see what that looks like at the next level because these guys are producing. These guys have a relatively encouraging yards per carry metric, and yeah, they may not be housing touches every single game. They may not be like breaking off that long run every single game, but they're effective running backs, and again, that's the difference. They may not be elite, they may not be like these blue chip type prospects, but they're capable running backs. And the problem is it's really hard to separate some of those guys when at the national level when you have 30, 40 types
Right.
of these kind of guys.
No doubt about it. All right, let's combine the two wide receivers, Tay Ellis, Caden Howard. Right off the top, both of these guys seem like they need to get bigger for college play, particularly Caden Howard listed at 145 pounds, which is just wild to think of. But when you're as fast as he is, maybe no one can catch you, so it doesn't really matter that much. These two guys both strike me as really sort of interesting wide receivers for Daikiel Shorts and guys that, are probably less likely to help immediately but could really evolve as potential playmaking wide receivers, particularly with Caden Howard with that kind of speed. There's always something you could do on a football field.
Right. So Caden Speed and what he's done on the field so far, the talk around Nebraska and the pitch to him has been just come in and be Ja'Cory 2.0. And so, like Ja'Cory, he's going to need to put on some weight. I think it's going to be, compared to Ja'Cory, a bit of a longer burn. It's not going to be day one like Ja'Cory was, where
Yeah.
pretty early on, it was clear Nebraska had something special there, a playmaker of sorts in Ja'Cory. And with Howard, it's there. He may provide some early value, perhaps on special teams or something, but he's a guy that's going to need some time to really add the weight to his frame, really do the work on his body that's needed to contribute at the next level. With Tay Ellis, he actually comes in with a higher floor than I think some people will realize, just as a route runner and a receiver. He's super sound as a route runner. I think he has a very good understanding of timing within his routes, how to create separation out of breaks. He's not the fastest, not the biggest, of course, and not necessarily the most explosive, but it's a very sound route runner. With relatively raw hands. I think something when I saw him earlier this month, something I came away leaving, I wanted to see more from him, was just being more of a hands catcher. Just had a tendency. Part of it was his first time really teaming up with Trey Taylor. As we know, Trey's very accurate, so it was a lot of throws that were just pinned at his chest. That he's catching with his chest, catching with his body. Just want to see him be more of a secure hands catcher, bring those passes in a little more safer. So that's something I'm looking for with Tay as a senior. And I'll say this too. After seeing him in person, I had some questions about Tay, wondering about whether he was primarily going to be a slot. But after seeing him in person, I think he can work in outside. What I'm going to be curious on is both these guys are going to be joining a receiver room that's much more crowded than the room that Ja'Cory Barney joined, 3-4 years ago when he first joined at Nebraska. With Tay now having teaming up with Trey Taylor for his senior season, think he's got a shot to actually climb up that list just because of the chemistry I expect he's already got with Trey, and the chemistry I expect to continue to develop through their senior season. He's one that could move up the depth chart because, like I said, he's not. I don't really know what the ceiling is on Tay, but his floor is really high. He's got a relatively high floor. Going to be like, I think, just has a chance to just a guy that gets open pretty consistently, can work outside, can work inside. Going to need to add a little mass to his frame, but you get around him, you realize he's got some thickness to him. He's especially in his core. He's someone that I think is going to fill out better than expected. Not necessarily, he's not going to look like Isaiah necessarily, but you're looking at a guy who could certainly add some like real weight to his frame at the next level.
Yeah. Let's go to a guy that I am as interested as anybody in the class because I feel like it's so quiet since he committed. We talked about him maybe a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the defensive line and where Jaden Travers fits. This is a guy that, like, I just feel like nobody talks about him, which only makes me more intrigued by the fact that nobody's really talking about him. What do we know about Jaden Travers? What's kind of the thought process there? When's the last time you checked in with him? What's new there?
A couple weeks ago, he's firmly committed. Nebraska staff checked in, stopped by recently. They continue to keep tabs on him. He's maintained a good relationship with Jamar Mosey's, again, critical to that recruitment, believe it or not, just amidst the coaching changes and all of that. But he's developed a good relationship with Corey Brown. Anthony Johnson, the assistant director of play personnel, another one who's been critical in that recruitment, making sure Nebraska stays the program for him. And again, Nebraska love to get him in the fall. I think they're loving his commitment even more now that they've switched to a 4-man front. I think he's actually a better fit in this front. I think in the previous front, he was probably a true defensive end. But you look at his frame, you look at what he does well on tape. He's someone now that they can kind of figure out what he does best once he gets to campus and adjust his body accordingly. Whether that's, I think he's going to have to put on a little weight regardless, but that's bulking him up to 275 pounds and keeping him a defensive end, bulking up to 280, 290 plus, and moving him to 3-tech. I think he's capable of doing both, and he gives them, again, with the coaching staff that in Roy Manning and Corey Brown, who are both recruiting at the Power 4 level for the first time in a bit. For Brown, this is the first time in a while. Manning, this is the first time really recruiting the edge position at the Power 4 level since he was at USC, I believe, was the last time he was doing this. So it's been a while for both of these guys. And they've done relatively good work early on, have set themselves up with a few good targets. Let's get 2 4-star defensive linemen on campus in the last week. and are on the upward trajectory with both. They were in my recent stock report, Nebraska trending up for both. But knowing all of that, knowing Nebraska has a ton of work to do on the defensive line, it really helps that they have this guy committed as kind of this not foundational piece necessarily, but this is your cornerstone somewhat of this class. This is the guy you're kind of building off of now as you're filling out the rest of this class. And yeah, Travers is the highest ranked. He's again not the sexiest either, not the flashiest, but you love the movement skills you've seen on tape. You like the versatility you've seen on tape, the violence he plays with. And again, this is the guy the staff, now that they move to a four down front, have some options in terms of what they can do with him. And I don't see him really going anywhere. I think he's really enjoyed what he's heard from the staff. If they move on from him, it's going to be for an external reason or because someone closer to home of Virginia or Maryland really pushed the issue.
So we got a question here from Husker Alex. Has Travers visited? Because I don't think he had by the time he committed. And
No, he visited.
he does.
He visited once in the fall, and then he was back for junior day.
Oh, okay. Well, then there we go.
Yes.
He's been on campus a couple times then. All right. We'll finish up with Matt Erickson, the offensive lineman from right here in Omaha.
Yeah, excited to really see what this looks like as a senior. I think quietly been one of Nebraska's more vocal peer recruiters. Trey and Tay get a lot of love for their peer recruiting efforts. Matt Erickson is active, and it's with offensive targets, it's with defensive targets, it's with in-state guys, it's with out-of-state guys. He's working on Barry Cottrell right now, working on a few other offensive linemen, develop some good relationships there. For him, again, I don't know how to say this without. I'm not trying to sound disrespectful. It's not, but I am a little more confident in his ability to develop at Nebraska now that this offensive line staff is in place. Now that Jeep Wade and Lonnie Teasley are in place, I think they know what to do with what is a large, large ball of clay. Again, this is a guy that's, where's he listed at now?
What
Six,
is
7.5,
yeah.
283.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah, so large ball of clay to work with. Very good athlete. Again, there's a lot when you look at the body and the just him moving around. We're like, okay, I'm very intrigued by what I see. I'm very intrigued. He's got skinny ankles, which is important for bigger offensive linemen, and his growth potential as well. He's got the range you're kind of looking for in the frame. I don't know his exact wingspan off the top of my head, but I think he's capable. I don't think at least it's not negative, I don't believe, off the top of my head. So capable frame, capable athleticism. And yeah, I mean, again, it's not a one for one thing, but like with Torrey Pittman a little bit, just want to see a little more consistency on tape. He needs a big man with big features, big hands, some power to his frame, all of that. Want to see him take the kid gloves off a little bit. And again, not like just want to see that as a senior. Play with a little more physicality, play with an edge. You're a Nebraska commit. You're a Nebraska legacy, man. Like I just like to see him play, and not to say we haven't seen it to this point. We've seen him in spurts, but I want to see that more consistently. If you're a Power Four commit in the state, the frame that he has, playing the competition he does, I just want to see a little more dominance, a little more consistently. So that's my big question for him as a senior. And as far as where he fits in at Nebraska, he's more of, I think, again, longer term could maybe work in at left tackle if the development goes right. But I think if you're looking at a clean projection, this is someone who better fits in maybe at right tackle or could potentially slide into guard as well. I
I
think
wondered this. Yeah.
he can slide into guard, I think, no problem, no real issue. I think he's got the footwork to do so. But at the size, with the range he has, I think they'd like to keep him out of tackle.
Right.
And again, when you're building out this class, if you can pencil in Matthew Erickson as a tackle commit in this class, it helps you figure out how the rest of these pieces will fall in place for this class. But I think that's something that's still an active communication. I don't really know if that's something that's going to get figured out until he gets to campus and starts working out in front of the staff. I mean, they're still kind of figuring it out with. I mean, Claude Puma is the guy they see as a left tackle longer term, but that development still needs to come together for Claude Puma to truly be a left tackle here in Nebraska.
Yeah, we'd see this from Mavs guy 842, a 6'7" guard, and I would just point out, like, Zach Sterup played guard for Nebraska and was very tall, ends up in the NFL, ends up playing guard there. Like, so much of guard isn't necessarily the height, like it's athleticism, it's footwork, like Tim said, it's the ability to get out and run, and can move people that way. So we've seen tall guys play guard before. It's there has to be a lot of footwork, I think, that goes into it
Yes.
and the ability to move. I mean, that's that more than just the fact that they might only be 6'3" is why a guy ends up inside as much as anything. Tim, I mentioned before, and I think I might have mentioned it before we were even live, that I had a few other things I wanted to get into. I kind of want to save those now. We have a handful of questions, and this is a good precursor because next Thursday, if it works for Tim, what I would like to do is almost just like a full mailbag kind of
Mhm.
show. Like just have people get in your questions. You can put them in like people are doing over here in the chat. You can do it on the Discord. You can tweet at us. I'll see if I can find another way. Just I want to accumulate a fair amount of questions for Tim. They could be anything. They can be stuff as it relates to 2027 recruiting. They can be stuff as it relates to recruiting in general. It can be about the team. You can ask Tim what his favorite breakfast spots are in Omaha. He tweeted a few of them at me here this weekend. If you're going to Houston, Tim will give you the lowdown on places you need to go there. The great thing about Tim is he has answers if you have questions. And so let's go through a few of these here. And we'll just kind of start throwing them up on the screen. Tim, are all the new offers concerning, or are we taking a bigger high school class than last year?
It's going to be a much bigger class than last year. I mean, that's the one thing to keep in mind. Like, last year was an aberration. I don't expect that, not anytime soon, but like just in terms of how they're moving forward, I'm expecting bigger high school classes moving forward. Now that said, yeah, like I think the movement at certain positions is interesting. I think you've seen some new offers at wide receiver and DB. I think both of those rooms, like we've talked about in this class, like it's just in this previously. I think it's just two coaches leading their rooms, Nikhil Shorts, Addison Williams, and have a really good understanding of their board, understanding of what they need. And hey, if they miss out on some guy, what do we want to have as backup options? What do we want to have established? It's just filling out a board. So the wide receiver and DB action, I'm not super concerned by. Now, offensive line, we've seen a new offensive tackle offer. It was the new number 8 offensive tackle they just offered last night. I checked in with him. We have that story up at Inside Nebraska already. He's someone to keep an eye on moving forward. Nebraska making an aggressive push to try and get him on campus after missing out on Kennedy Brown, not trending in the right direction for Olu Olubobula. I do think tackle is a somewhat of a need now. They have a few irons in the fire there, both at tackle and along the interior of the line. Mentioned this on this show and in a few other places. Timmy Aliu, who we've talked about a good bit, is a guy I could see playing tackle or guard at the next level, especially after getting eyes on him in person. Athletically, never really had a question about his ability to stick outside, but was listed at like 6'3" and a half, 6'4". Getting around him in person, I think he's on the north side of 6'4", big frame, and a very well put together frame that I think can stick a tackle if he's asked to. So that's one. I again, the O line board expanding as needed because we've seen some guys come off the board, but not necessarily. They're not moving in a panicked way to kind of expand the board. Now, defensive line, not seen a whole lot of new offers. We've seen a handful of those. Again, it's just more so just the attrition of the board. You've seen a couple guys come off, a couple new guys added to the board. Edge is a position where we are seeing a few new offers, and that is a board I am a little bit concerned with where things stand. I don't know how many Nebraska's looking to take. It may just be 1 to 2, and like we've said on this show before, if they land someone like Prince Goldsby, the number 10 edge rusher in the country out of Blue Springs South, then you quickly kind of answer some of those concerns. You quickly remedy some of those concerns because you go out and make a splash in addressing that position. But they've made some new offers that lead me to believe that board is not trending in the way they wanted to. At least with some of the options outside of Goldsby, I think they're well positioned there. Need to close there, but that's really important. But they've set up a few options. Linebacker is a position weirdly that has gotten weird this offseason. Brandon Lockley Jr. was expected to officially visit later this summer. He's now committed to Oregon. I don't expect those official visits to happen anymore. They made a late offer to Brayton Feaster. He's also trending to Oregon. I don't think that one's going to go Nebraska's way as well. What's really left for Nebraska at this point is really at the top of the board's Kobe Rhymes, a 3-star out of North Kansas City, a prospect they love, prospect the staff would love to have, and a guy that I think is better than his ranking. I would turn on the tape with him. I love his game, and a guy who, again, I've said this multiple times. He's someone I believe is a future kind of green dot type player, your future captain, future leader of the defense. He's that type of linebacker, that physical, that athletic, all of that. We've seen a bunch of new linebacker offers recently, and what does that? It just again, things aren't trending well with the guys outside of Rhymes, and so you've seen some new movement. I think my concern, and if you had a level of concern, I think the highest concern right now is probably linebacker and edge. Lowest concern in terms of new offers is probably DB. They made a new DB offer to a 4-star out of St. Louis. It's just again just a guy they liked when they were out in the trail, not necessarily someone that they see being a part of this class, not necessarily a committable offer. I hope that answers that question, right? I mean, like yeah, it's going to be a bigger class, but there are a few positions where the new offers we've seen as of late are a serious concern, and some where it's just what you need to do when the board adjusts on you.
All right. Well, a couple more here. This is one that we could spend an entire show probably on. So we'll just throw it up. You don't have to give we'll come back to this. Mavs guy 842. How is 5 for 5 changing the expectations, conversations that recruits are having for their true freshman season? And I'm sure what he means by this is without a redshirt year, is the expectation for these guys that they're gonna play definitely, or do you have to sort of try to set some parameters of like, hey, we're going to have the opportunity to get you in. You're going to be in charge of whether you put yourself in the best position to play.
So even before 5 for 5, it's not to say that everyone at the high school level now, or and I'll say this: the portal has changed the way teams, including Nebraska, now view high school recruiting. In that, for the most part, you're not going to take a bunch of swings on guys that you don't see contributing for 2, 3 years. For the most part, you're going to take the guys you're taking, the guys you're investing money in at the high school level in terms of investing a real rev share, your priority targets. These are guys you see contributing in your first 2 to 3 years. And ideally, I mean, we saw this last cycle, their top 3 commits, Danny Odom, Claude Puma, and Jamal Rule. I would say those three, 3 top commits, all guys expected to contribute in some form or fashion in their first year. And for Claude, in their second year, but within their first year, you're expected to make a big contribution. You look at this 27 class and what Nebraska's doing and how they're building it. The conversations they're having with the top of board targets, these are guys they want to come in and compete for playing time immediately. And position by position is a little different. Of course, the offensive line, the goal of Jeep Wade is to develop this room and establish and build up the depth in the room where they don't really need to rely on freshmen unless they're just ready to go. They want to establish some depth there. So that's a position where, the conversation ranges between we see you competing for playing time, we see you competing to rotation, or hey, year 1, year 2 is just about sitting down and developing. But other positions, I'd say receiver is really a position now at the high school level. If you're recruiting guys like that, those guys aren't coming in to sit and develop, because you could just save that roster spot and go. Like, you could take if you take 3 receiver commits, for example, and your third receiver commits a guy you see stashing and developing for 2, 3 years before the transfer portal existed. Now that third roster spot, that third receiver spot, is probably going to a receiver in the portal that can give you snaps from day one. Because why would you waste that roster spot on a guy that's not going to play for 2, 3 years?
Right.
So some of these positions now, it was already moving that way, but I think more so than ever now, there's going to be an emphasis on investing and putting together high school classes of guys that can contribute as soon as possible. Not to say they want these guys coming to Nebraska developed. There's still development that needs to happen in their first semester, first 2 semesters on campus before they're ready to play. But guys that they invest in need to know for a fact, or need to know very at a high level, that they're not going to be wasting money here on a guy that's not going to give them any valuable contributions within their first 2 to 3 years on campus. And I do wonder, again, we can spend a lot of time on this, but I do wonder how this maybe affects the lower end board guys, your flyers, again, for a staff like this that does love to take swings on athletes, how this affects maybe that strategy. But at the end of the day, I mean, you have to work with what you have. You only have so many resources to go around. You only have so much time with these guys. This is going to change roster construction. To what extent is going to depend roster to roster, team to team, and how they choose to take advantage of this. But with Nebraska, I think is they're a program that's really interesting because of how they've evaluated to this point and how they play like special teams, how they utilize some of these young guys on the roster. Like, knowing all of that, I wonder how different, for example, at Nebraska, how different is the special teams unit going to look next year? Are we going to see a bunch of freshmen out there because they're the best athletes on the team?
Yep. That's the first thing that comes to mind is that you don't have to worry about saving or maximizing when these guys play their 4 or what would have been 9 games or whatever it is. Now it's you're getting him out there. If he's the best athlete, he gives you the best chance. He's a gunner. If Caden Howard shows the ability to tackle and he can clearly be a gunner when he arrives in 2027, I think you're going to utilize that, as soon as you can. All right, I have 2 more questions to finish up. If you have anything else, May 7th, I believe that's next Thursday, will be the day that we'll go heavy with questions for Tim. I love this. We're gonna get good stuff. We got someone who wants to know about the process, Tim. Tim, how do recruiting sites calculate the overall score for a team? This is a very good question. I work in the recruiting industry. I have no idea how the math works for most of this stuff. Maybe Tim can tell you, but how can a team have an average ranking of 87.45 but get a score of 83.6? Why such a difference? Other schools, their scores closer to average.
Yeah, I need to ask around on this one. I'll need to ask around with our rankings team and our database team on the exact specifics of why. But I know some of it is what is weighed in terms of the consensus rankings versus the actual rivals rankings. And some of it is also the score is also dependent on um who you're put like the quality of recruit you're pulling, the value of the positions, and also the distance those guys come, the blue chip ratio, all of that's factored in. So it's the easy answer is it's a bunch of different averages beyond just the class average ranking. Is where that other number comes from. But I can ask around and see if I can get a more definite definitive answer on that.
All right, and we finish up with this from Theo. Tim, I don't know if you'll have any thoughts on the Nebraska baseball season ticket holder controversy, but I have some. So don't worry if you don't have any strong thoughts. But this is what Theo wanted to ask today, and I talked about this on Happer and Schaefer. I feel pretty strongly that the athletic department has moved in a direction where it is doing so much to accommodate donors over the people that are the actual individual stakeholders of these, fan bases. We're seeing this with the volleyball reseeding. I fear that it's to come in basketball. Football is going to have its own reseeding with the stadium, but with baseball specifically, and what Theo's asking about is that if Nebraska is able to host a region, they will give the first rights to those tickets, not to baseball season ticket holders, not to the people that have been going to the games necessarily, but to people that have the highest level of priority points in the Husker athletics boosters. Essentially, they have their points and their donation points, and so it'll work off of that. In years past with volleyball, things have gone where the volleyball season ticket holders would have the first right of refusal. And then if there's any leftover tickets, which there never is with volleyball, it would go to the general public. Here, it will start with these donors, work its way through. You'll get into your baseball season ticket holders. Now, he has in here, should they keep their seats for the postseason? That's not a Nebraska thing. This is an NCAA postseason event, not a home game. So Nebraska can't just allow for everybody to have their usual seats. But I do believe that baseball season ticket holders should have had first dibs on this. I think they're going to be able to get into games. I don't think people are going to be left out in the cold and won't be able to go. But it just feels like yet another sign where there's a little bit more emphasis on overall donations, even if that's for a different sport, because people want to be part of something that's happening and having success rather than valuing those stakeholders who have been the season ticket holders for years with volleyball and with baseball. And with baseball specifically, if you have people that have been season ticket holders for a long time, Nebraska last hosted a regional in 2008. Like, they've waited 18 seasons, or 17 if you discount the COVID year, for this opportunity to come around again. I really do feel like they should have had the first dibs for those tickets, but things will work out. I have no doubt that if Nebraska hosts a regional, they will have a terrific crowd, and the regulars that are normally there will be there again. But I don't love the direction the athletic department is going with these things. So wanted to get to his question there. Tim, I appreciate it. We ran a little long today. I appreciate that. We are going to do this mailbag pod next week, though. I'm excited. I hope people come with some off the wall questions. I hope they come with some recruiting questions. I hope that they just ask you to do a live evaluation of a random player that you have happened to see. Anything could happen here on the Unemployed podcast. And of course, on a Building Blocks Thursday, which features the one and only Tim Verghese from Inside Nebraska. Tim, thanks again for your time today. Everybody, we'll be back. Feedback Friday returns on an actual Friday. We're not having a jump around like we did last week. That means you get Jack Mitchell. That means there's been extra time between the last time we talked to him and when the next time we talk to him for things that could annoy him and set him off. You never know what rant we might get on Friday. Everybody have a great Thursday. We'll catch you tomorrow at noon.